Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm taking a little time to answer some of the questions that I've received from all of you over the past few weeks. I know it's taken me a little while to get to these, so thank you if you've been waiting for me to make this video, and thanks for your questions because they're really good. And by the way, if you have any questions you'd like to send, I'd be happy to answer them. You can email them to me at info@nightlightastrology.com. So these are really good bhakti questions, really good to get into the philosophical end of bhakti for sure. So I'm going to keep this anonymous, but this writer or this viewer wrote this. A couple of questions have been on my mind related to your bhakti yoga content. First, I'd like to understand more deeply, how can God be in everything, good and bad? For example, if I've done something bad in my past that has hurt other people, how could it be that God was in that? Don't I turn away from God when I do something bad, selfish, or hurtful? So that's the first question. The second question was, does it mean that God is there no matter what I do, but it's my choice to be turned away from him, but he is still there? So this is really good because I've had similar questions myself as I began studying bhakti. And of course, the scriptures tell us a lot about this in the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and other sacred texts. And what I'm going to say I've learned from my own gurus and from those texts as well. There's a famous question that comes up in the Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes called the Bhagavat Purana. And that question has to do with this incident where it appears as though God favors the demigods and really doesn't like the demons. And yet God is said to be neutral, meaning God doesn't favor this or that, that all things are sort of have their place in God. And so God ultimately is not, judging or playing favorites and things like that. So, how is that possible? And also a deeper question that comes up, as you can hear in this question, is doesn't that sort of mean that God is condoning evil? So in the Bhagavatam, the answer that is given that by Srila Prabhupada, who was the translator and wrote purports helping, young Western people in the 1960s to really understand what this ancient philosophy was all about, said like this. Let's say that you have a heating system in your house and a cooling system, like you've got heat and you've got central air. Let's say that heat is, evil or bad, and air is good. I'm just making this up. You can tell that I like to be cool. I like the summertime. I like to be cool in the summertime. Anyway, so let's say that heat is evil and the air is good. The point is that the vacillations between hot and cold that happen are all coming due to the power that's filling that heating and cooling system. So the power, the energy that fuels the oscillation between heat and cold, between good and evil, that's God. And that's why God is, in a sense, neutral, because the God is the ground of energy and being that allows for those fluctuations to occur. So similarly, in each of us, Bhakti describes two birds sitting on a branch inside of the heart. And one is the soul, your soul, my soul, and the other is the super soul. And the soul has its existence because of the super soul. Just like a ray of sunshine is its own entity, but rests upon or exists because of the sun. The sun ray can't exist independent of the sun. It has its origin, roots, and is in all ways dependent upon its source. So similarly, each of us have autonomy, we have free agency, we have free will, and we can do whatever we want. We can turn toward God or away from God. The fact that we can have our own agency is because we're fueled by our source. So in a similar way, we can choose good or we can choose evil because we are individual, autonomous agents, beings with free will, and that same energy that runs through everything is running through us. That supports, sustains, and allows us to choose God or to turn from God. And in that way, everything is ultimately rooted in God. The bad choices that we make or the good choices that we make in the material world are all facilitated by God. The energy that allows them to be is coming from God. That does not mean that God plans or intends bad or evil things. It means that God allows them, because in the scope of creation, God allows everything. All things are possible in and through God. That's the basic gist of it. So, yeah, so hopefully that clarifies. I hope that that's helpful. It does mean that God is there no matter what, whether it's a good choice or a bad choice. Remember that spiritually speaking, the choices between good and bad in the material world are rooted in the desire for personal, separate gratification. And in Bhakti, we say that the real use of free will, the real intelligent and spiritualized use of free will, which starts to liberate us from the cycles of good and evil, up and down, the wheel of fortune, samsara, and this world of Maya in a general sense, is our ability not so much to think about ourselves and how to make good choices versus bad choices, how to fight good versus evil, but is how to turn toward that source that facilitates all of it. And when we turn with love in our heart toward that source that facilitates all of it, we slowly we start to get taken out of the world where those opposites have this way of being irreconcilable and very painful. And in Bhakti, we say that the kingdom of heaven, the spiritual plane of existence, is a place where all diversity is still maintained, all light and darkness. Everything that we see here, all the variegation of the world is still there, but it's reconciled because it's all taking place with an understanding, loving connection to its source. So in the spiritual world, you could just imagine that some of the same, epic things are happening, that things actually happen in the spiritual world. It's not just a glowing white light that doesn't change, but that those changes are happening in the light of God. And so that's why it's called heavenly, because anything can happen there, but it's all made heavenly. For example, I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm sad, there is a way that if I hear the right song, I just like to be sad. You know what I mean? It feels good to be sad if you have the right music. So similarly, if we have God in our lives, then every emotion, every diverse thing that exists is made perfect, is made whole, is made complete. And so also remember that the facilitation of these different shades of creation from the materialistic standpoint really feel hellish versus good, good versus evil, and all of that. And God allows, God facilitates, God's energy allows for that experience to exist, existing through our choices, through our free agency. When we turn from God, we create that world. That world is made for the facilitation of souls choosing that. But obviously, again, in Bhakti, we say, when the heart turns toward God, then a different kind of world opens up where the same diversity is there, but it's happening with an understanding of the undifferentiated source of all of it. And that brings bliss into everything and love. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Okay, so the next question is then, do all souls finally get back to the garden, return to the source, even the bad souls? Or are there souls that really die if they keep on refusing to turn to God and keep on doing bad things? And when we get back to the source, have we all by then dealt with all our karma? Okay, good. So first of all, let's kind of let's get rid of this idea of bad souls. First of all, so there's no bad souls. We're all equally beloved by God. Each of us have an infinitely unique and perfect relationship with our source. And so that's first of all. Second of all, there's no judgment for us in being here. Like this world, if we want to be here experiencing the illusion of being separate or apart from God, God facilitates that. God allows it. God doesn't judge it. God is always attempting to reach out to us to bring us back into loving union. And the universe is orchestrated in such a way to help us see the error of our ways, to see illusion and to turn back to God. So it's built in with that component to try to help us, but it's still our choice, and there's no penalty for being here. We can be here as long as we want. In fact, a word that's used in the in some of the traditional yogic texts is anadi, and that means without beginning, without origin. So this material universe is a realm of God, and it's always been. It will always be. It's a dimension of reality. It's a dimension of God's energy. So there's nothing wrong with it necessarily. It's painful for souls to be here, and God is always inviting us to come back, but there's no judgment in being here either. So if that makes sense. And then, of course, it is painful. And so as we go, the idea is that the soul can turn back to God and then, reunite with God in the spiritual world. But it's not good to think about us as this place is a bad place or souls being bad or anything like that. And then souls can't die. That's an impossibility. Krishna says quite clearly in the Bhagavad Gita when talking to Arjuna on the battlefield, he says, you and I and all these soldiers on this field have had many lives before and will have many lives to come. The soul can't be killed. The soul is unborn and undying. So no, souls can't die. They're not, squashed by God for doing bad. There's not any condemnation or judgment. God doesn't, favor or disfavor people in a way like that. Because if you want to be here, be here. If you want to come home, please do. I miss you. That's kind of it. So, and then also, we don't, in Bhakti Yoga, we don't get back to God. We don't return to God, so to speak, through burning off karma. It would be a bit like saying, okay, look, because our karma is also said to be anadi, which means without beginning. We have an association with this realm or dimension of experience that is, too old, too long to remember the origin to. And some even say, literally, we've always been here. We're endogenous to this realm, and that people can stay in this realm if they want. It's pretty diverse. There's a lot of different things you can do, and more than our minds can even comprehend. But some souls will also realize, as spirit souls, that they'll realize the nature of this world and realize that there's something illusory about it, and therefore want to return to God and choose to do so. When they choose to do so, they don't do it by trying to burn off past karma somewhere in the past. That would be like trying to empty the ocean with a Dixie cup. Instead, they surrender. They say, I can't do it. I can't do it. There's something fundamental that I need God to do, that I need God to fill me with. So in that sense, it's about surrendering the heart and receiving grace. Christianity is very similar in this regard, where we receive the grace and mercy of God by saying, can't do it on my own, and I have a tendency to turn away from God. So I need help. And we help ourselves in a sense by, aspiring to be a servant of God, or the servant of the servant of the servants of God. So that's the model in Bhakti, that we make our way to God by surrendering, and by looking to become a humble servant of the divine, and both here in the world and also in a literal sense, as in worshiping, loving, joining our heart to God in a transcendental sense. So I hope that helps answer the questions. There's one more question we're going to take a look at today. Hanging out with someone who is closer to God than I am. By what yardstick shall I measure whether or not someone is closer to God than I am? This comes from the fact that in a previous video, I mentioned that one of the things we do in Bhakti Yoga is look for people, teachers, mentors, who are farther along on the path of Bhakti than we are, and who in a sense have had more experience and time cultivating that intimacy with God through practice and through service. And when we do that, it really helps us to grow in our own faith, because they give us a picture of what exists within us as our potential, for cultivating devotion. So this person in response is asking, by what yardstick shall I measure whether or not someone is closer to God than I am? And is it really that they are only closer to their own perception of God? Is it the same perception I have? Well, what we mean by this is, first of all, not that you grow closer to God in an objectifiable, measurable way, as in you're obtaining something or possessing something or earning or getting something. But what we mean is that your relationship, which is utterly unique, totally idiosyncratic, completely personal and completely perfect in its own uniqueness, that relationship is enhanced and is grown by virtue of being with people whose their own inner effulgence, their own sainthood, so to speak, is in a stage of blossoming maybe a little bit further than our own. This is why in this tradition, as in many other traditions, we need teachers. We need, veterans, so to speak, who have been on the road of devotion and loving God for a long time. Similar in AA, in 12-step groups, you need a sponsor, right? So this is the role of the guru, but not just one guru, many gurus, and learning to see people who are on this path as the most vital resource that we have. So there's something about being in service and being basically being in community or in friendship even with people whose devotional lives are exemplary in some way. In bhakti, we should always, in a sense, be, sort of in a low position, looking up at the people that we say, I'm not really good at this. I have a hard time keeping remembrance of God in my heart. So I see people, I can see people who, their saintliness, their devotion really inspires me. So that's the idea. It's not a measuring stick concept as much as it is looking for inspiration, looking for people who are exemplary in the way that they love God and that can inspire us. And the general rule of thumb is that, people who have, it's not always the case, right? Everyone's coming in karmically in completely different places. But you know it when you see it. Like in my experience being in the bhakti world, people who have been practitioners for decades, there's a way that they're seasoned, and that certain limitations or personal blockages, or they've faced some trials in their practice and have grown and have different kinds of virtues and qualities that I can see just by virtue of being with them. So this is not to create some hierarchy or pecking order of how important someone is. It's just to say that, like, for example, if you want to learn how to paint, or if you want to learn how to make cabinets or be an architect, you need to spend time around people who know how to do it, or who are really steeped in the language. If I want to learn about podcasting, I need to spend a bunch of time on YouTube watching videos about podcasting. So similarly, the idea is just that we need to spend time around people who have been investing more of their lives and time and heart in loving and serving God than we have. That's an important part of bhakti. But it's not to say that it's a big game of comparison about who's farther along and all of that. It's not quite the right way to hold it. So hopefully that helps. And that also doesn't mean that there aren't other types of relationships in bhakti that aren't really important. For example, being with people who are relatively peers, who make you feel like they're kind of on the same level as you, like that confidentiality and friendship in devotional life and spiritual life is really important. As is being a teacher to people who are newer than you are. There's going to be some people who are brand new that your experience, your own level of realization can speak to. As my guru says, the most important thing is we just don't speak outside of our realization. Like whatever our realization is, just try to speak within that and be honest and humble within what we've realized for ourselves. And we can be teachers for others. And then we need people who are kind of more or less in a similar place that we're in. And then we need people who are, more advanced to inspire us and hold up an image that we can follow. So that's the idea. I hope that was helpful. Thank you guys for all of your questions. That's it for this one. And as always, if you have any questions that were prompted by this or anything else that I create for my Bhakti channel, feel free to email me, info@nightlightastrology.com. All right. Take it easy, everyone. Hare Krishna.